This is the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. I'm your host, Amanda Kendall of the notaballerina.com travel blog. Every episode, I'll share travel tales from several fellow travel lovers, and together we hope to entertain and inspire you, remind you of some of your own great travel experiences, and encourage you to hit the road again soon. Hello and welcome to episode 38 of the Thoughtful Travel Podcast, and it's all about New Year's Eve travels, because it's not very long until New Year's Eve 2016, and before we know it, it'll be next year already. I started this podcast back in March, so it'll be coming up to its first year in the not too distant future, but we have to get through New Year's Eve before that. Now, I have to admit that although I've been outside of Australia for quite a number of New Year's Eves, they were always in the Northern Hemisphere, so it was always cold, dark and in the middle of winter. And, of course, back here in Australia, New Year's Eve falls in the middle of summer, and it's, for me, a much easier time to get out and stay up late. I'm not very good at staying up late in the first place, I must confess. And so those overseas New Year's Eves in cold, dark weather have not been super successful. I do remember a really lovely one spent with some friends and even my sister in Bratislava in Slovakia a few years back, and we made a snowman on our friend's balcony first. Actually, it was a snow woman, but it's another story. And then we watched all the locals letting off their firecrackers for New Year's Eve. Now, here in Australia, nobody can buy firecrackers. It's not something that's legal, and so to us it seemed extraordinarily dangerous to have all these people, most of whom who'd had a few drinks as well, letting off all these firecrackers. So we were a little bit freaked out, we Aussies. But it was a fun night, and one of the more memorable New Year's Eves I've had on the road. But today we're going to hear about several other New Year's Eves that were probably in some ways, no, definitely, a lot more exciting than mine. So the first guest today is the lovely Kim-Ling of Travel-Ling. Now, I met Ling very recently when we were the two bloggers sent on this trip to Japan that I have spoken about in past episodes and all over Facebook, etc. So we were thrown together for a week. And before I left, I must admit that I was thinking, okay, so I'll be with this one other blogger for a whole week and I don't know anything about her. Ooh, I'm a bit worried. What if she's awful? What if we don't get along? But she was fabulous and so much like me in so many ways, and we totally hit it off. So, I'm sure she was grateful too that I wasn't like a complete weirdo. Or maybe we were both weirdos and we were weird together, but it was all good anyway. So, Kim-Ling's come on the podcast today to talk about an experience she had one New Year's Eve going to the island of Ibiza.
When you hear the word Ibiza, I don't know about everyone else, but we always think, crazy parties, lots of dancing, massive, crazy, cool atmosphere. So when we were in Spain, we're like, yes, let's do New Year's in Ibiza. Like, that's the coolest way to bring in the new year. Little did we know that the island shuts down over winter. So,
of course, it's winter there. Oh, no.
So we got there and we're thinking, wow, like accommodation is super cheap. Like, this is great. We are so winning this New Year's Eve celebration. And we got there a couple of days beforehand, did a little sort of walk around the island, realised there are a lot of stores closed, not open until I think it was March, April. And we're thinking, okay, that's, a little concerning. Oh, well, it's all right because New Year's Eve is massive. Everywhere you go, there'll be like heaps of cool clubs to ring in the new year. So we started walking and looking at all the nightclubs, and they've got these crazy big billboards, and it says from April to October, the best parties you'll ever go to. And we're like, okay,
no.
Well, it is December, so what's happening there? So it turns out every nightclub on Ibiza is closed during winter, except for one.
Oh, no.
So thankfully there was one open. So that was Pacha. And so we bought tickets thinking, yes, that's awesome. Like, at least it doesn't matter. We're not big clubbers anyway. We just thought it'd be great for the experience. So we only need one club. The club actually doesn't open until 1 a.m. So,
oh, no.
So we're like, Okay, well, all right. So how are we going to ring in the new year going clubbing when no clubs are open? So we went looking around and we managed to find a restaurant. And in Spain, people eat really, really late anyway. So most restaurants normally won't open until the kitchen won't open until about 9:30 at night. So it kind of worked out. We thought, you know what? We'll book a really late dinner reservation, and hopefully eating that late will keep us awake in time to ring in the new year and then go to a nightclub on Ibiza. So we had a dinner reservation for 11 p.m. at night.
Oh my goodness, I would be so starving.
So we had a nap to try and get the hanger pains away. And then we sort of headed out around 10 o'clock to the restaurant and got in quite, what was seeming early for the Spaniards over there. And we had this great meal. And to be honest, it was actually, even though our plans of having this cool, crazy nightclub experience didn't work out, it was a wonderful experience because for New Year's in Spain, they have this tradition that at the strike of 12, you eat 12 grapes on every strike, basically, and that's to represent good luck. So we actually got to have this beautiful moment where we sort of felt like we were part of this cultural tradition, even though we were just, on holidays, because there was a lot of local families eating in this restaurant. So when we got seated down for dinner, they handed us a bag with, cute little party blowers and little hats and streamers and a bag of 12 grapes, which at the time we weren't really sure what that was for, but they're like, just leave it until 12 o'clock and just watch. Basically, don't do anything, just watch what everybody else does and follow their lead. And so come, I think, 12 o'clock, the clock strikes and everyone stops what they're doing. Everyone stops eating. All the waiters stop. They all come out. They all get their grapes, and the whole restaurant just collectively ate their grapes, as fast as they could. And the problem was they were massive grapes and they weren't seedless. So without sounding like a fussy traveller.
Yeah, but 12 is a lot then to stuff in.
12 grapes with seeds in them was actually quite a challenge. So I almost choked, but it was great. And then at the strike of 12, once everyone finished their grapes, everyone turned to each other and just gave hugs and Feliz Año Nuevo, so Happy New Year. So we had all these lovely strangers giving us hugs and saying Happy New Year in Spanish. So it was actually a beautiful moment, even though it was nothing what we had prepared or expected when you go to Ibiza.
No, nothing like what I expected you to tell me about.
Yeah. So it turned out to be a wonderful memory, but just, something that was like when you say you're going to go to Ibiza for New Year's, you kind of expect a completely different story. And so at about 12:30, we get our taxi to go to Pacha, and we're like the first people in line. I think we were also the only people under 60 years old.
Oh, really? Oh, no.
Because I think, we clearly just don't have the stamina the young Spaniards do. So we had lined up to get in at 1 a.m. We were definitely the youngest people in line and first in line.
Oh, no.
And we actually had a flight to leave Ibiza the next day, so we didn't want a ridiculously late night. So we went into the nightclub. The nightclub was amazing. It was about 3 or 4 stories.
Oh, wow.
With stages and different DJs and different setups. It's nothing like a nightclub in Australia, that's for sure. Yeah, incredible. But again, I'm pretty sure we were the only young, sort of people under 60 there. We saw a lot of people that clearly went to Ibiza in the 70s and just never left.
Fabulous.
I'm pretty sure I thought I'd seen Richard Branson, but it wasn't. But it looked like a Richard Branson lookalike with his glitter jacket.
Fabulous.
Yeah, it was really, really cool. But we called it a night at about 3:30 a.m.
The night was so young then.
I know, and that was when all the young people started entering and were like,
wow.
What? Come on, where have you been the last 4 hours? But clearly we are not cut out for Ibiza.
No, I definitely would not be.
It was a very, very cool experience and definitely one I'll never forget. And thankfully, not that I would ever do any drugs or anything anyway, but Considering the nightclub doesn't open till 1 a.m., you don't really get to start drinking or doing anything until then. So by 3:30, we were quite sober and quite happy to get home to bed.
Ling tells a great story, doesn't she? And this was not what I expected her to tell me when she said, "Oh, I've got a New Year's Eve travel story. It's about Ibiza. I'll tell you." So it was completely not what I expected. And that is definitely half the fun of traveling, is having these experiences which are not what you anticipated at all. But because of that, in some ways, they're so much better. So I think that's a great story. And I'm impressed she made it until 3:30 a.m. because I definitely would have been in bed long before then. I think I would have been in bed before the single open club on Ibiza even opened at 1 a.m. That's really stretching the bounds for me, even on New Year's Eve. So you might not get to Ibiza or to some big party on New Year's Eve, but I think it is really nice to make an effort to do something different, somewhere different, to make it a bit more memorable. I mean, not everyone agrees with me, but I think New Year's Eve is a really special night. I think it's a really important time of the year to think about what's happened to you over the previous year and look forward to the new one. And I'm a big goal setter and I love to make those kind of lists and New Year's resolutions and stuff. So I think it's good to do something different for it. One person, a friend of mine who has done something different recently was Bortoletto of Travelletto. And she came on to chat to me about New Year's Eve last year, which she spent over in Tasmania in Australia.
I don't really like New Year's Eve. It's one of those events, a bit like Hens Nights, where there's a huge build-up and expectation. Often the night is a bit of a fizzer. But last year we went to Tasmania straight after Christmas, 6 a.m. on Boxing Day. We were on a ferry, from the Spirit of Tasmania, from Port Melbourne, across with my mum and dad and my husband Andrew, to Tasmania, a 9-hour crossing. Not very good when you're a bit dusty from Christmas Day. That aside, we got to Tassie, did a bit of a driving holiday. But New Year's Eve, we bought tickets to the Taste Tasmania Festival, which is just the most awesome food festival in Hobart. Runs over, I think it's about a week, but on New Year's Eve they have a special night and you have to, generally it's free to go to this festival, but on New Year's Eve you have to buy tickets and there are various levels of tickets. So we bought the top level, which is where we got a dedicated seat at a table for the entire night on the harbour side. So we had... Yeah, so it was really good. So there's pop-up stalls all throughout. It's right there on the harbour. So on one side of the harbour, you've got the Sydney to Hobart yachts that have come in and the slower yachts that are still coming in from that race. So there's lots of international people around in international yachting gear, and so there's a real buzz about Hobart at that time of year. And then on the other side of the harbour is this Taste Festival where there's this huge warehouse. I don't know, might be called something different, but it's massive and there's all stalls all the way through it of all different Tasmanian produce and wine and different dishes, and some of it typically from Tasmania and others that, noodle places and Indian places and whatnot. And you just paid for cash to get whatever you wanted, and they had like specials with Riesling and oysters, so we pretty much ate my weight in oysters that night. Yeah. But it was just fantastic. You got music in all different pockets of this huge space. So a rock band at one end where all the kind of young people, people who like that sort of music, were just going off, and a jazz quartet down the other side that was a bit more kind of refined and sophisticated, I suppose. And then, a DJ, and it was just like kids, old people, people our age, young people, 20-somethings. It was just such a really good mix. And then at 9 o'clock there were fireworks that went off, and then again at midnight. So it was just the best New Year's I've had in ages, actually, years.
That does sound excellent. It sounds like it's a something for everyone kind of affair.
Yeah, it was, but it was like busy enough that it was just buzzing, but relaxed enough, but not so packed that it was uncomfortable, and it was so good because we had this dedicated table that was ours for the night. It meant that we could, my dad would go, I'm going to go for a walk, and he'd come back with another dozen oysters and a bottle of Riesling, or I'd go for a walk and come back with some dessert or whatever. And it was just really it was just really kind of relaxed and chilled out, and a really nice way to spend New Year's Eve and spend it with my mum and dad, who was 68 at the time, last year. But yeah, wonderful. And front row seats of the fireworks, which was over the water. It was just beautiful.
That sounds perfect. Now, I wouldn't have thought that Tasmania was like the big New Year's Eve destination of Australia, but that does sound very tempting and probably a lot easier to deal with than like the fireworks in Sydney Harbour.
Oh, totally. Like, for starters, not as crowded, not as many people. And because we were staying in a hotel that was just a short walk from there was no transport issues or driving hassles. And, Perth, try to get a taxi on New Year's Eve, good luck. It just ticked so many boxes. And I was expecting it to be a good night with lots of great food, because I'd heard about the Taste Tasmania Festival, but it just really surpassed all my expectations. All of us had a really, really great night, and the table we were on, it was a long table that sat 10 people. So we had 4 seats. There were 4 of us on this table, and they were ours. And the people next to us, this couple that were kind of in between my mum and dad's age and our age, who were touring around, they were lovely. So we made friends with them and shared some food with them. And then, it was just a really nice night.
Guys, New Year's Eve in Tasmania sounded really lovely, and it's got me wondering, what am I going to do this New Year's Eve? I will be in Perth, my hometown, but perhaps I need to look out a little bit more closely for something interesting and different to do. In the meantime, I asked in the Thoughtful Travellers Facebook group for some ideas of what everybody else's New Year's resolutions were. I love New Year's resolutions, and what their travel goals for 2017 were. And I got some interesting responses, and thought I'd feature a few from some of the listeners that I know have been listening from the beginning. And thank you to you lovely listeners for doing so. So first of all, it was Janie. And Janie said she plans to try and slow down her travel this year. She must have been listening to our episodes on slow travel. She said not taking less trips, but actually taking more time to enjoy the areas she visits without feeling the need to cram everything in. And for that reason, they're planning to do some house sitting in 2017. And she sees house sitting as a great chance to stay in one place and enjoy the surrounding area like a local. I couldn't agree more. And I think I replied to her comment that I follow quite a few house sitting profiles and accounts on Twitter. And they're always tweeting out these house-sitting assignments in exotic places around the world for sometimes 2 weeks, sometimes 2 months. And it's really lovely to sit and dream and wonder what I could do if I was staying in such and such a place for a couple of months. So I'm sure Janie will enjoy her slow travel. And in fact, early next year, I have another episode coming out on slow travel. So listen out for that one, Janie. Jeff Ryan, who you'll remember is the author of that great book about the Appalachian Trail. He's actually also good at slow travel. Well, he was a bit of a tease because he said he is planning a giant trip, but he can't share yet what it is. So I'm very intrigued, Jeff, to find out, hopefully in early 2017, what this giant trip is all about. You do things quite gigantically, so I'm very intrigued. Oh, maybe a giant trip could be coming out to Australia. Maybe he's going to come visit me. That would be even better. And next I had Julie, who is a local Perth person, a lovely friend of mine, in fact, and a very lovely listener. And she's luckily kicking off 2017 with a trip to Bali for 15 days. So she's moving around a bit, but it's mostly focused on relaxing. So not a travel heavy trip, but a relaxing heavy trip. And I think that at this time of year, there's a lot to be said for that. So she highlighted there'll be lots of pool time, no dishes or cooking, a few bintangs, and all about relaxing. But she also says her big travel goal is to get back to Japan. I know Julie lived in Japan and taught in a similar way to what I did, and her goal is to one day live there for a little while again. And I think that's a fabulous plan. So it's a good goal to work towards. Now, Leslie is another Perth lady who really does some amazing travels and always plans them in an interesting way. So she said, she described it as, for next year, her normal routine: dream, plan, talk about travel, read about travel, and travel. And that's pretty much correct. So she said next year she's got a bucket list trip coming up to India. I'm really intrigued to see what she has to say about her first time in India. a weekend in Singapore, work trips to Christmas and Cocos Islands, also very interesting destinations that the average person doesn't get to go to, and a drive across the Nullarbor Plain for the first time to spend a week in Tasmania. So for those of you who aren't in Australia, the Nullarbor Plain is that massively empty part in the middle of Australia. I've driven across and back once. Well, I've been driven across and back once. I went in a camper van with my parents when I was 11 or 12. It's a really long way. It's kind of at least 3 days of really nothing. But I think it's something that everyone should do at least once, especially so you can realise how enormous and empty Australia is. There's something quite unique about that. And I'm sure that Leslie will have a great time, and I look forward to hearing how she goes. And the last of the listeners I'm going to feature is Robin, and she has all kinds of great plans for 2017. She says it will include mountains, kimonos, temples, sushi, we can see where one of her destinations is, castles, fast trains, Tasmanian devils, whiskey, wine, more food, lots of laughs with friends, celebrations, and all of these through her trips to Japan and Tasmania. Tasmania keeps cropping up today. We even had Di talking about it earlier. And of course, she'll be planning for 2018 travels as well, and a few other travel-y kind of things like camping, four-wheel driving, sitting around the campfire, more wine and sunsets. They sound like fabulous New Year's travel goals to me, Robin, so I'm sure you will enjoy them fabulously. So do let me know what your travel plans or travel goals are for 2017. You can get in touch with me on Twitter at Amanda Kendall. Use the hashtag ThoughtfulTravelPod. And you can also join our Facebook group and interact with some of the people that I've just been speaking about. There's such a great bunch in there and always have something interesting to contribute. You can find our Facebook group just by searching for Thoughtful Travellers in Facebook and ask to join, and I'll also leave a link in the show notes. The show notes for this episode will be at notaballerina.com/38. And of course, I cannot finish up without shouting out a huge thank you to my lovely guests. So Kim-Ling Richardson of Travel-Ling. So that's travel-ling.com, because Ling's her name, or what we usually call her. I think that's a great clever name for a website. And also Di Bortoletto of Travelletto. All these people making websites based on their names. I need I don't know, how can you combine Amanda and travel? Just doesn't work. But you can find Di at travelletto.com. It's travel, 2 L's, 2 T's, travelletto.com. So thank you, everybody, for listening to the Thoughtful Travel podcast during 2016. It has been such a pleasure to do it. One of the most fun things I've done in years. And to look back on 2016 and see that I launched this podcast and am still doing it and still enjoying it and getting more and more listeners each week. It's really a really wonderful feeling. So thank you very much for everyone who's been listening and messaging me and contributing, and especially to my great guests, because of course I would have no show without your amazing stories. So coming up in 2017, I have lots more to share. I will be taking a break of a few weeks over Christmas and New Year and early January, but I will be back and I look forward to interacting with you again then. So please hit me up on Twitter or Facebook and don't forget to leave a review as a Christmas present for the Thoughtful Travel podcast on iTunes, and I'll love you forever. Thank you so much and Happy New Year. This has been another episode of the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. Show notes and other information are at notaballerina.com/podcast. Join me again soon for another chat about why we travel. Bye for now.
Jackrabbit FM. For your ears.
Who is that? Hi, Podcast.